Welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed. Thank you for joining me here. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. And we are trying our best to understand what exactly philosophy is. And in doing so, we have discovered through reading the text of the Phaedo, written by Plato, about his teacher Socrates. We have discovered from that in discovering what philosophy is, we are also discovering the meaning of our lives, the purpose of our lives, which is interesting because in this quest, we've also been learning what philosophy isn't all the way through. We do both, and as we read, we've been learning why we're doing both, because both are necessary for a kind of understanding called dianoia, using a kind of thing called the dialect. You need both. And thankfully, we had been doing both, understanding what philosophy is and what it isn't. Really important considering philosophy is one of the most misunderstood things on our planet, which is a kind of tragic irony considering it is the most important thing that we can understand and do here. And we're discovering that through the words of Socrates. And so, because we've been doing that, we've recognized that, hey, it's kind of weird to say, oh, we can understand the meaning of life. We can understand the purpose of our being here. Because in our work in what philosophy isn't, we've discovered that they specifically reject that. You can't know. It's unknowable. Usually they say it's not something you can know, or some people take a one step down and they say, well, it may be knowable, but it's not knowable to human beings. Some people take another step down and say, well, maybe it is knowable to human beings, but not to us. Or maybe nobody has experienced what it's like to be dead and has come back and told us what it's like, and therefore we can't make a solid conclusion about what our purpose here is and where we're going or where we came from. So varying levels of rejection of whether or not the purpose of life exists in a knowable way. But we have been studying what exactly is the dialectic, because this is Socrates' yoga. It's his method. It's not his. It's something he points out is universal and true for all physical things, all beings. And so we can, when we discover that there are levels of rejection of the meaning of life, our philosopher ears should prick up. Oh, hang on a second. Levels? That you can see a hierarchical order in? Oh. That means what? That means the dialectic. That means that you can use the dialectic to understand even this, which is something we're discovering about the logos. If the logos and the dialectic is universal and it applies to all things, then you should be able to use it to understand all systems that have an hierarchical order to them, an understandable hierarchical ordering. I play music, and that's really important because it helps you understand why music is the way it is. What is appealing for music? Why the Greek diatonic scale works the way it does. But it also, I guess you would say, music is a step below mind, philosophy. So we could use the dialectic to recognize, oh, here are a list of maybe 4 kinds of ways of rejecting that there is a knowable purpose to life. And therefore, there would be 4 kinds of ways if there is a knowable purpose, a knowable meaning to life. How close can we get to it? Okay, that's also a promise. We have to keep our eyes open and keep our ears pricked. Keep that question and hypothesis in our question and hypothesis sack in our inventory, because that's what it means to be a philosophical adventurer, because we're going to learn more and more about what those levels might be. But thankfully, we know that there is a structure. We've gone far enough into our work on this channel and as a group to recognize that there is an order, and we have a loose structure of it because of all the work that we've been doing. But also in doing the work, we're realizing, oh, hang on a second, Socrates is giving us the material. He's implanting the hidden questions and giving us the material to do the work. In the story, figuratively, he talked about explaining and mythologizing. But also, in his yoga, he talked about there being a kind of way of collecting oneself together, self by self. Thumbs up, out of the body. Connecting the idea of the spiritual yoga or separating of the soul from the body with the idea of self by self, which we have done enough work. We've leveled up sufficiently to recognize, oh, hang on a second, that's one of the categories of the dialectic. So we're very lucky. We're very fortunate that we have the words of Socrates recorded. We're very fortunate that it's one of the few texts that survive the several burnings of the libraries in our history. But we can recognize, again, there's the counterattack. If there is, there's also if there isn't. If there's a truth, there's a counterattack. If there's a dialectic leading to our destiny, there's its shadow. The dialectical structure that our problems play out in. So we recognize why there was a counterattack, most likely. The rejection, the anti-logos rejection to the logos. But fortunately it survived, and fortunately we have a new translation which has the Greek itself. So we don't have to do interpretation. Why? Because our shadow is projected into interpretation. Interpretation means adding to what isn't there or leaving out what is there. And so we project what we already believe or we already think, and we might be blind to things that may challenge our fundamental false beliefs. But fortunately, we can play the game. We're at a level of development and we're at a level of work in philosophy that we can pick up where we left off from Socrates and learn what we need to learn to understand the meaning and purpose of our lives, reach that ourselves, and also reflect it in our way of being in the world so that others may benefit as well. And maybe as a consequence of that, give humanity what it needs, or allow humanity to also awaken to the philosophical quest and learn what they need, what we all need to A, reach our highest destiny, and B, free ourselves from the shackles, from the chains of fate, the ladder and the shadow of the ladder. So that's very exciting. But also challenging, if that's the case, if there's an A and a B, if there's a new truth, but there's a counterattack, then we ourselves might be facing a counterattack. If you come along this far in the series, you might start to notice that what we normally call the inner critic, or the or the negative daemon. We have a good daemon in the text we're seeing, a good daemon that communicates the self-logos, that's beneficial. And in philosophy, we have a special word for that, providence. Communication from the divine or from the self through the logos for our benefit. Artfully done. But often that voice is more quiet. Often the louder voice, especially while we're awake in dreams, it's a little bit different, but that's an exciting topic we can get into later. But when we're awake, normally the beast's voice, the monster. In the Republic, Socrates talks about without understanding, there is this paradigm. There is a knowable level of reality called being, from which we reflected into our physical world, we have the adjectives we see. We see adjectives like beautiful things, just actions, good sandwiches. Notice they're all adjectives. But the noun that is reflected, creating these adjectives, we call them the self-er terms. And Socrates has been talking a lot about them because that's what we're interested in. What is actual beauty itself? Not what's a cobbled together theory from all of your physical observations. That's kind of modern science, right? Cobbling together a theory to kind of make sense of your observation. No. We want to go to the source. What is beauty itself? What is justice itself? That's the realm of being. Socrates is also helping us out by saying, hey, by the way, it's all the one thing. While you can recognize aspects of it, it all has a hypostasis called self-ousia. And by the way, that also applies to souls. Do you notice many physical things like physical bodies that you can see with your senses? But you can apply an adjective to them, an adjective that you never actually see as a thing itself. You never actually see goodness as a thing. You never actually see beauty as a thing itself without being an adjective describing a beautiful person or a beautiful sunset. Is there something else? This is what Socrates has been talking about in the Phaedo. Is there something else like that? An adjective you give to some bodies and not others? How about ensouled? Some bodies seem to be ensouled, have a soul, have a psychic element, have a planning and a desiring and an outward moving aspect to them. That we put all those things together and say, that's the soul. And corpses, of course, don't. Have you ever seen a soul with your eyes? Or heard it with your ears? This was the argument that Socrates shared with us. Therefore, is the soul more like the body, or is it more like the divine, like the ideas? Idea means to behold. The beholding of that self-ousia, you can recognize it as beauty. And people who have those experiences, they normally there's one feature that sticks out. That's the idea of idea. I like the metaphor. At all times, all of the physical forces are in effect. Gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces, lots and lots and lots of forces. But when you jump out of a plane, you might really notice one aspect more than others. Wind resistance. Or gravity, maybe. That's the one you really are paying attention to because that's the one the most pertinent to your current experience. I like that as a metaphor to talk about the ideas. They all have the same hypostasis. They're all essentially being, the brilliant light of pure being. The object of knowledge, allowing us to remember in our learning. But you might recognize, oh, this is the most beautiful thing ever. This is beauty itself. Just like you might recognize wind resistance among all of the aspects of the physical forces, physical laws. So too, all of the aspects of the metaphysical, prior to physical, being forces, you might recognize beauty more pertinently in an experience. But someone might have a similar experience and maybe everything fits together perfectly, the way it should be, necessarily. Self-justice. And so on for all of the other ones. Of course, I don't want to give you describe them for you, but I want to encourage you to imagine all of the other self-er terms, and he's given us a few different lists in the Phaedo. Imagine what that might be like. What would it be like to experience the same thing, but equality itself, greatness itself, or holiness itself, all of the terms that he's used. There's a little mental exercise for you. In fact, after doing that mental exercise, Socrates would say, now do a dialectic on it, because that's the exercise. That is the exercise of a kind of understanding called dianoia that brings us closest to the experience, jumping out of the plane, in a good sense, of course, which is important because we're learning that we're not supposed to fear that experience. In fact, this is one of man's biggest problems, fearing death. And we just went through in the Phaedo an argument, hey, can you slay the fear of death like you're slaying a child's fear of the boogeyman? We don't want to be in fear. And also, we don't want to have the opposite, desire. We don't want to be attached to the physical world as though it's true, because that's going to make it difficult to stay there as well. We'll jump back into our physical body, a donkey, a bee, a wolf, in our reincarnation. But we want to go to the next level up. We want to upgrade ourselves to be with, as Socrates says, better men who've completed their work, better gods and masters, and good daemons. So there's the fear of death and being attached to desire. These are the four: fear and desire, which are, of course, future thinking, anticipations of pleasure and pain. And Socrates says, hey, by the way, pleasure is the worst, because the things that you experience extreme pleasure in, you nail your soul to it because you think it is the most true and clear, real and clear. That's the problem. So physical senses, and he pointed out, like eating and drinking and sexual experiences. Although he does have a kid. He has a young child, even in this text at the end of his life. So he hasn't, it's not abstinence. It's a certain kind of approach to the ups and downs of physical life, pleasures and pains, fears and desires, where you recognize it's not the most real and not the most clear. Then how should we approach them? Well, the problem we're reading is, hey, that nails the soul to the body. It makes your soul like the body. And by the way, there's a kind of justice in your incarnation because you have to do some sort of payment or requital for spending your time assimilating the soul to the body. But also it manifests in your reincarnation. Are you afraid of the divine because you've been taught, oh, that's the devil or spirits or something scary? Be attached to the physical world, what you know, what you're comfortable with, what you're used to in your physical senses. So are you at the fear of death, like most men do, or are you nailing your soul to the body through a desire for physical pleasures? So what do we do instead? How do we approach the ups and downs of physical experience instead as a philosopher in the best way to benefit ourselves and our afterlife? And of course, that which we draw our attention to, we reflect ourselves. So you could say all of these self-ideas, beauty and justice, are reflected in the adjectives. Because a beautiful person isn't the same thing as beauty itself. It's very, very different. It's almost night and day. Not quite, but almost. It's so different. But there is a reflection of beauty in physical things that share its name as the adjective. There is a reflection of justice. There is a reflection of goodness. And what we draw our attention to, not only are we saying, like in the text, we're accustoming our soul to it, we're nailing our kind of, in a positive sense, nailing our soul to that. We're making our soul more like what we put our attention to, which could be a nailing to the body, or it could be a purifying because we're making ourselves like that which is pure being. So what we draw our attention to. I have a friend, Jacob, who talks about the lag. There's a time space while we're alive in a physical body where we don't experience the immediate ramifications of our actions because we have time to have problems, to make mistakes, but also time to reflect on those experiences, to discover the way of reflection, self-logos and dialectic, so that we can learn. So it seems like, hey, a lot of unjust people get all of the benefits in the physical world. Well, this is only a short amount of time compared to eternity. But the fact that you make one mistake and all of a sudden you've lost an arm. Hang on, it doesn't work that way. You make a mistake, but you have time to think and reflect, have different experience, collect experiences together, recognize there are certain key themes, self-logos ideas, reflect on them, reflect on the shadow. Oh, I thought this was good, but actually in reading the Phaedo, I'm learning this is the nature of the good. So we have a kind of lag, time in our physical world. Whereas the way we've been describing the non-physical world being, it's eternity, so it's timeless. So what do we want to do with our time lag? What do we want to do with our time here before the sun sets, as Socrates says? How do we approach our physical? Because you can't escape pleasures and pains. It's just part of being human. What do we do with our fears and desires, our pleasures and pains? Well, we're seeing it's what we accustom our souls to in this time period that has the effect in our evolution, in our incarnation. So how should we approach things? Well, Socrates pointed out, hey, there's one way of looking at all physical things, to see they're all the same. In the text, Socrates pointed out, by the way, all things are the same in that they all seek self-ousia. They all seek union with being. Even sticks. You see two sticks? Are they equal to each other? Well, maybe, depending on what angle you're looking at. But does equality itself change depending on what angle you look at it? No, equality can't be unequal. That doesn't make sense. Socrates says that's what they seek and desire, which is bizarre to imagine all physical things have a yearning. Using a word he used. Because, by the way, another way of seeing they're all the same is they can remind you. That's learning. When Socrates embraces you, you start by only knowing the physical world. That's where you start when philosophy grabs you. But then you can become a lover of learning. We recognize that there are three parts of the soul. There's the inner desire, our belly, which is the biggest part. Our outward moving part, which is the medium size. We want to be honored. We want to seek the truth. We want to have fame, or we want to be liked as we act in the world. But also the smallest part of our soul is the reasoning part. What's interesting is Socrates says, hey, the problem if you're not a philosopher is you're a lover of the body. Because those are the two options. You've got a soul, and a soul can seek being, or it can seek the physical, the body or being. It's kind of in between both, you could say. So which one are you? By the way, all human problems can come down to being a lover of the body. And a philosopher seeks truth in being, and also an integration of that into his own self-being and way of functioning called the virtues. So we practice the virtues as well. In everything we do, we practice the virtues. So that's one clue in how we approach our physical world. Something to do with the virtues. But we are understanding, hang on a second. If you're a lover of the body, a philosomatos, you're going to be one or both of these things. A lover of riches, desire, that's your inward desire. You can buy all the stuff that you want with riches. Or a lover of honor. That's the middle part. So if you're only one or two of those, why is he missing out this third part of a physical soul or an ensouled physical body? Well, think about it. You desire, okay, riches, fair enough. Outward moving. You seek, what do you want to do in the world? You want the world to like you. You want to be respected in the world. You want to be valued. All wars are fought for one of those two things. Mainly riches, for stuff, but also for fame and honor. All conflicts. What about that third part of the soul? Reasoning. What does reasoning want? Could it be learning? You desire to learn so you can reason better. You got more information. You got more information to reason with, and more understanding of how to reason through learning, how to think, so you can use it for your benefit. So what if you weren't a lover of riches and you weren't a lover of fame? You weren't trying to make the big bucks and be a finance bro. You weren't trying to be Instagram famous, but you were interested in learning. Where would that take you? Well, Socrates says that's where you start. A lover of mathesis. Philomathesis. Okay, you want to learn information, but not just information, how to think, how to use that information. Where does that go? And where do you want to direct those to? You've got, let's draw a picture here. You've got information. You've got how to think. But you've also got a direction. What are you gaining information about? What are you thinking about? Or goal? Or focus? Oh, we got a triad. Funny how that works. Isn't it funny how that works? I don't know if I've got a laughter track. I do. Where does that go? Well, Socrates says a lover of learning becomes a lover of philosophy. Lover of wisdom. Philosophia means lover of wisdom. So what kind of understanding is philosophy about? Well, we talked about what makes philosophy compared to what philosophy isn't. Dianoia. What is dianoia? Because this is what philosophy is. Well, of course, it's directed towards being. So our focus or direction or goal, this is the thing with triads, they can lay on top of each other to gain insights. So the direction or goal or focus in learning becomes being. Because if you're learning, you can start learning about physical things. Oh, there's one beautiful thing, there's one good thing. But eventually you're going to start asking the question, what is the noun that the adjective is all coming from? Talking about the realm of being, substantive, the noun. Okay, well, that's part of dianoia. Dianoia is characterized by a focus of being, your understanding being. So what's the information we have been using? We have been developing an understanding of and looking for in the text the self-logos. There's our information. And then finally, how do we use the self-logos? How do we think? Dialectic. Isn't that fascinating? Another triad for our skill tree. So you've got three parts of a soul. You got the snowman. You've got the desiring or inner desire, inward desire, which can lead to riches in its negative sense. You have the middle part of the snowman, your outward outward movement, which can lead to honor seeking, be famous. And the smallest part of your snowman is your reasoning. Isn't that interesting? So, that's where we start. But Socrates is saying, hey, by the way, if the part of your soul that you are motivated by, you make this part, well, then you're going to be in this triad. Because that's learning. That is learning. And if you're a lover of learning, you are a philomathesis. Philomathesis. You remember that because people who love to learn like to make a thesis about their math. Math thesis. So you become a lover of learning, which means you have to, the planning or the reasoning part of your soul, that you need to, by the way, make good plans for those things. If that's the thing that motivates you, then you can become a philosopher. Why? Because reasoning involves collecting information, but also learning how to think, how to use that information, and having a focus. What do you want to learn about? The migrating habits of tree frogs? Well, you might start realizing that all the tree frogs seem to be following a certain theme, or there are certain archetypal bits of information, adjectives that are used. All tree frogs exist in some way. All tree frogs seek their benefit or seek their good in some way. If you give one of the tree frogs a grub and you don't give a grub to the other tree frogs get mad because they seek justice in some rudimentary kind of a way. There are funny experiments with monkeys that that get mad if you give a grape to one monkey and a piece of cucumber. They'll throw the cucumber at you like, hey, I want some grape. That's not fair. And they were happy with the cucumber before. But as soon as they realized that the other monkey was getting grapes, there was an injustice. And he threw the cucumber back at the scientist, which was very funny because monkeys are funny. So when you realize that there is a certain theme, you'll be forced to, if you keep loving learning, if you're not distracted by the honor you're getting in your work on tree frogs, or the money you're getting by being a rich tree frog scientist, and you get wrapped up in the problems of that. But hang on a second. What is this justice that all tree frogs have a rudimentary desire for? What is the goodness that they all seek? What is existence that they all have? What is the soul? There's some sort of consciousness, even in tree frogs. All of those words are categories of the self logos. You've suddenly entered the realm of being. What is the cause of the adjectives of that you see being expressed or reflected into the physical world, even in tree frogs? How do you think? Well, you got to think well. You don't want to be some crazy person on the side of the street yelling about how great tree frogs are. You want to have do your thesis on the migrating habits of tree frogs. So you realize I have to define my hypothesis. I have to give a quick demonstration of what my findings were. And of course, there are terms for that within the academic community. I don't know what they are. But I know that they exist, like overview or synopsis or something like that. And there's a term for defining. Even in Euclid's geometry, he has his own version of these. I used to study this. I'm I will probably, if there's an interest in the channel, we can get into studying Euclid, because Euclid is a fantastic example of this. The best kind of reasoning directed towards the physical world. Why? Because Euclid, not four-dimensionally, but two-dimensionally, created a complete and self-contained, almost, system of understanding. So it's kind of a model for what understanding is by understanding all two-dimensional geometry. It was a fantastic exercise because it's very close to the logos. It's only like one step down, or two step down maybe. So if there's an interest in and it's a method of understanding, it's a mode of understanding, it's a direction where you can gain as complete an understanding as you can get of the physical world. That's Euclid's Elements of Geometry. If there's an interest in the channel, we can set something up together and maybe make it a $1 Patreon membership or something like that. If there's an interest, we can go down that way. That could be exciting. But he has his own words, enunciation. I haven't been in the text for a while. Specification, where you define what you want to show. Anyway, we're talking about tree frogs, not Euclid. You have to define your hypothesis about tree frogs. You have to give a demonstration of what you hope to achieve or what your findings were, so you don't have to read the whole text. You can get it in its succinct form, the argument from your study in its succinct form. But then you have to divide it up into all of its arguments, all the research, and then you have to gain something from that research that you can pull together in your synthesis and analysis back to your definition. Relate it back to the hypothesis. You don't want to go off on a tangent and realize, tree frogs eat grubs, and then go off on a tangent and make some conclusion about how tasty grubs are. And in conclusion, Gordon Ramsay should make a restaurant focused on eating grubs. No, your conclusion has to be about what you were focused on to begin with. It has to be about the migrating habits of tree frogs. So, you'll be learning not just information about frogs, but how to organize your thoughts. But then, when you realize, actually, hang on a second, in order to talk about frogs, there are certain fundamental ideas that have to exist primarily before even the principles of tree frogs. And you realize this way of thinking actually might also have a primary universal standard that has to exist for there to be a scientific method of inquiry in our theses. Therefore, your direction changes from physical objects to the things that all physical objects seek themselves, and all physical objects have a purpose to direct you to. This is the thing that Socrates is talking about. You might start with tree frogs, but they have a higher purpose to direct you to being. Not only do they seek being, do they seek goodness itself and justice itself, however, whatever level of consciousness they are aware of it. Same thing with humans. They also have a purpose to direct you to being. So all of a sudden, you've changed your direction from frogs to being. The terms you are seeking are not physical terms, like how many tree frogs are in how many different areas of the Amazon forest. Your information now is about beauty or justice or excellence, all of the things that tree frogs goodness, tree frogs require or seek or desire, or are necessary for that information to exist. And therefore, if you structure the self-logos or how to think in a similar way, you're actually doing something called the dialectic. And Socrates, it says, that's where philosophy takes us. We have to start by loving this part of our soul. Otherwise, yeah, there's lots of shapes and colors of famous people or promises of fame or likes you get on Instagram that can direct this part of your soul and be your motivation for your life. But you're nailing your soul to that physical world, which will affect your reincarnation. Also, there's lots of shapes and colors that glorify the rich lifestyle. Making that dollar bill, y'all. Get rich or die trying. Again, nailing your soul to your physical body, which will affect your state of being, but also where your soul goes in the next lifetime. And how well you can separate from your body in this lifetime. It's a heavy burden. But also, the physical body, when it's enslaving you, because if you're a slave to the riches or the honors that fuel or give pleasure to your physical body is in charge, not your soul. And of course, less time for philosophy. But if you are a lover of reasoning, but then you get into loving reasoning itself, reasoning about reasoning, or you start by looking at sticks or tree frogs, you'll end up, if you keep at it, in this realm. By being a lover of learning. And this, having your focus on being, using the terms of the self-logos, using the structure of the dialectic, altogether that's dianoia. And Socrates pointed out it's dianoia. We have some quotes. Surely we should have this as a quote. We've been a bit slack with our quotes in this text. But let's see if we got one. Here we go. This is a lovely one. Self-justice, beauty, and good. The ousia of all selves in being is contemplated not through the body, but whosoever prepares themselves by most accurately dianoia-ing each self-investigated will approach the closest to nous. We want to get nous. And there's also another quote where he uses the word contemplation. And I don't think I nailed it down, but I will. I'll do that after the stream. But that's the word for that experience is also contemplation. So, and then, by the way, Socrates points out that, hang on a second, not only... So we have the triad here. We have so many triads now. Oh my goodness. Look at how great these triads are. Doing your life's work in a worthy way. Okay, one of the triads we have isn't down here that I can see. So we should make one. It's on the board somewhere. Let's put it down. The rest of it. So therefore you start as a lover of learning. Philomathesis. Lover of learning. And then that turns you into a... If you keep that up, a lover of wisdom, which is philosopher, and that culminates in a lover of phronesis, this mysterious word that we're looking for, which is phronesis, which is tied to the virtues. It's the golden coin virtue, that the work in all of the virtues that you've been developing, you trade it in for, and it makes them valuable only. All of the work. So start as a lover of learning, that brings you to a lover of wisdom. Lover of wisdom. But being a lover of wisdom is one of the virtues. wisdom is one of the virtues. We have a virtue list. That's a triad. So many triads. Yep, here we go. No, that's a different one. Oh, this was the one. This was the. These weren't just triads. These were a many to one triad. This is a different set of triads. Right. Here we go. The other triads are here. All of these were all examples of manyness to one. So like manyness of the physical world. You see many tree frogs. You see a tree frog here. You see a tree frog here. Oh, you want to know what is the tree frog? And of course, how we think. Inside good, cave good. Outside cave bad. That's the cause of divisive politics or racism or prejudice or conservatism. But we want to go to the self-logos, the true way of progressing. Spirituality in myself and other culminates as oneness, and so on and so on. But we have these two triads should be over here. Over here. With the regular triads over here. So here we go. Yep, and here we have the virtues. So that's what we're after. Courage, temperance, and wisdom. So those are the virtues. So if you're a lover of wisdom, how did we define? Well, it's focused on being. Oh, okay. So this is the transition. Wisdom is focused towards being, but then in your initiation experience, to make you a true mystic, many other staff bearers, but only those who do this make you a true mystic. You get a phronesis relationship with being. So if wisdom is directed toward being, how do we understand that? Well, just talked about how when you're a lover of learning, we have that. Oh my goodness, we have so many triads. Here we go, let's do this one. You're a lover of learning at the bottom corner of the triad, turns into a lover of wisdom, and that culminates in lover of phronesis. So what is wisdom? Well, let's use this triad. This is the benefit of having triads. You use the triads to understand them. Well, we talked about the transition from the physical world, non-philosophy, material science, to philosophy is this thing called dianoia, which is the self-logos kind of information, or the self version, the excellence of information, the highest kind of information. Because tree frogs might go extinct, but justice and beauty itself won't. So it's the highest kind. And how to think, that's the dialectic is the archetype. Again, the highest kind. Different ways of doing scientific methods or theses might come in and out of style, but dialectic will always be. And directed towards being, of course. We want the noun. So, we just said wisdom is directed towards being. It's the virtue for the highest part of the soul. We also recognize, hang on a second, if there are three parts of the soul, we can have temperance, courage, and wisdom. Those are the three primary virtues. But they're all defined by the self-logos, directed towards being. They're all this. This is what makes the virtues the virtues. So what's that? So what are we doing? This. The virtue of wisdom is nothing other than dianoia. And as we saw in that quote, dianoia makes you closest to the experience, which is the leveling up, which therefore the initiation, the experience itself, going to the realm of being. So that wisdom becomes phronesis, explaining to us this triad. lover of learning becomes a lover of wisdom. By the way, that requires the virtues, because you're not lover of wisdom sometimes, and then you go chase physical pleasures and pain, then seek fame or money. We just read that last time. Socrates was very clear. Stay with it. That's the virtues. It's at all times. That's what the virtues are. So, and the payoff of doing it at all times is, first of all, you're not reincarnated downwards. You can go up to a better place with better conversations, with better men and better gods and good daemons. So it affects your incarnation, your reincarnation. But also, the payoff of doing this at all times not only is nurturing your soul in a certain way, and by the way, that's the celestial justice, the divine justice, reaching beyond lifetimes. How come unjust people seem to be getting all the rewards? Well, only in this life, which is a blip in the all of eternity. It's nothing compared to all of eternity. But Socrates pointed out there's a just recompense, requital, payback for the way you nurtured your soul in your next lives. Mentioned that in many texts, but we're reading it in the Phaedo. So doing it at all times nurtures your soul in a certain way that can benefit or harm you. And of course, what we focus on is what we nurture, but also what we focus on affects how we reflect to others. So the more we focus on justice itself, the more we reflect justice itself. As a musician, that's key as well. The more I can focus on the idea of the song, that which the artist, whoever the artist is, myself, or if I'm playing a cover, another artist, the pure idea, the more I can reflect that to the audience. And as soon as I start looking at the audience, how are they looking? Are they enjoying it? What do they think? How are they judging me? I lose all magic. It becomes really hard to play music. But this is a universal thing. Because we are in experience, which means there are two things rubbing up against each other. We're always... Being a philosopher isn't something you do and then you finish. We keep the conversation alive. Socrates says that we keep repeating it. You keep showing up on the doorstep in the symposium. You keep showing up in the gates of the Phaedo to be let in to talk to Socrates. You keep doing it. Hey, you do a dialectic, you learn more, you do another one. This idea of being ideal and perfect as an end doesn't exist in the physical world. Literally, because it's the physical world. It's a back and forth of opposites, but also it's not the realm of being. Meaning, if you're here, you're in a relationship with something. You're focusing on something. You're thinking about something. So our question is, what do we want to think on, focus on? What do we want our focus to be? What do we want our direction or goal or focus to be? And how well do we do it? And you say, hey, not only does it affect whether or not you purify your soul for your reincarnations, but if you don't do it, you're nailing your soul to the body. But also, that's the virtues. Doing it at all times is wisdom. Planning based on that at all times is wisdom. Holding on to it as the truth, even in the ups and downs, is courage. Desiring it above all of the other desires, desiring the truth and phronesis is temperance, desiring wisdom. But he also says there's a payoff. You get something. You trade those coins of those virtues you put in through practice and discipline and habit, becomes that which isn't something that changes with habit, but is always there. A kind of virtue that will never lose its power, which means a kind of learning we can take with us into the next life. Therefore, if we're here to do anything, it's probably going to be that. Can't take your Bugattis with you, but you can take a learning if it doesn't change, if it doesn't lose its power, if it's innate, and doesn't have to be put into the body. He talks about those virtues being kind of like the body, whereas this one not. It's like the divine. So what is that currency that you trade the virtues in? This development of wisdom? Phronesis. So this reflection on, and therefore you become you start as a lover of learning, because everyone starts philosophy in the physical world. Like very few babies are born into families where they learn this. Of course, it would be great to introduce it, but even if you introduce it at school, you're going to start in year one. All you know is your physical senses, all you remember. But then you realize, well, actually, all physical things that we can direct our learning to have a purpose that they seek being and to remind us. So this is the idea of selfish and selfless being insane, because their purpose is self-ousia and that they desire it themselves. And the more they can relate to that, the higher they can reach their self-ousia goal, or their self goal, using self in the honorific, the highest sense. The more they reach their self goal, their relationship with it, the more they reflect it. This is the idea of all physical things are in a relationship with something, in an activity of some kind, and also are reflecting that focus to others. And Socrates says that's how come that's the way all physical things are the same. So if you reach your highest goals, makes you a better reflection, you're helping others and you're helping yourself. So this idea of helping yourself being bad or selfish is freaking insane. You should encourage all people to reach their highest goals. All of the rhetoric and propaganda saying, oh, hold people down, defeat the enemy, win against your competition, win the capitalist game, win the imperialist game and invade that country, make your religion the only surviving religion, is bullshit. It's fundamentally ignorant, fundamentally incorrect about understanding the self-good. It's based on the opposite. It's not based on being. If you're directed towards riches, sure, being rich means keeping everyone in poverty. If everyone had $1 billion, you wouldn't be rich. You wouldn't be able to manipulate others through their lack or their fear of being homeless or fear of starving. That's what capitalism is based on. You can't have rich people if everybody is okay. You need to have people suck because it's competitive. You can't win the NBA unless every other team loses. But that's based on the physical world. If you are seeking riches, which is go back over here, let's get rid of this mark first. So, this gives us some clues on our big question. How do we approach our physical body, given that it's inevitable? Well, we can recognize the bullshit, we can recognize the shadow. Anything that's inherently competitive is of riches or honor. Of course, there's the opposite, where you could make everybody rich, although you wouldn't have rich. Everyone would be comfortable and wouldn't have to work pretty much at all, because we have the technology to meet most working things. Of course, not all like a 2-day work week maybe, but also we have time for philosophy. Love of honor, is that inherently competitive? Usually you could honor people who have mastered the self. That would be the honorific version. But if you're directed towards being, you don't have that competitive thing. You realize, hey, it's not when somebody has all of the pie, they reflect more of the pie. It's not physical where you eat all the pie, there's no pie for others. In order to be rich, you have to keep human beings in suffering and impoverished. Otherwise, how can you manipulate people by having more? Okay, this is injustice. And we can recognize it as the shadow of true learning. That's what the Phaedo is giving us, a way of understanding the cause of our problems and being able to recognize injustice. So our question is, well, how do we approach being physical? Socrates had a kid, so he had sex. Well, he don't nail your soul to it. Don't take the ups and downs of the physical pleasures and pains as most real and clear. But if we're seeing that the ultimate goal of the philosopher is lover of phronesis, and that comes through the virtues, along with being a lover of wisdom, the dianoia. So if we recognize philosophy and wisdom as dianoia, dialectic and self-logos applied to being, and we get there, so we have the experience ourselves, noesis, that which is knowable, another thing that distinguishes philosophy from non-philosophy. There is no knowledge experience. And of course, we recognized that in the start of this talk, the class, the hierarchical structure of the way people can reject knowing, it's unknowable. Or it doesn't exist, number one. There is no such thing as being that can be known. Maybe it is knowable, but not to humans. Maybe it is knowable, but nobody has experienced it and talked about it. Of course, if you think that, you'll be blind to the Phaedo, because he's literally doing that right now. So anyone said, well, no one's come back from the dead to tell us about it. Well, yeah. What do you think Socrates has been saying? Or you can only know it when you die. So that's if it does exist. Or if it doesn't exist in a knowable way to humans, because it doesn't exist at all. It's just not knowable. It's not knowable to humans. It's not knowable to humans now. A lot of ways of rejecting that. Talked about that. But so, if the learning becomes philosophy, which is self-logos and dialectic towards being, and that characterizes the virtues from the vices, because we recognize, hey, you can have a kind of mastery over your desires, giving a kind of temperance to pursue one of your physical desires better. That makes you really worse at doing that thing. Become a worse gambler. That's vice. Even your reasoning, you can have a kind of cleverness in your thinking, you can have a kind of sharpness on how to gather information and a kind of cleverness on how to think. But if your direction is not being, you can become an awful tyrant. That's vice. The greatest tyrants were able to think in some way, had some sort of way of planning, had some sort of way of thinking. Well, distinguishing them, they got into power somehow. So the thing that distinguishes the virtues from the vices is this. Therefore, can we use that understanding to answer this question? How do we approach our physical body? The ups and downs, pleasures and pains. Well, first of all, don't take it as most clear and real. Number one, that's the biggest problem that Socrates, that's the greatest badness that he outlined. But also, that's a negative. We want the positive. What do we do with our pleasures and pains or experiences of any kind? Well, maybe there's a way of applying this. If whatever you do, you're still focused on being, that's what you're in a relationship with in some way. Whatever you're doing, you're looking for the self-logos. And whatever you're doing, you're applying the dialectic. And all your logosing and your dialecticing is always in reference to being as the ideal. Maybe that's one way of doing it. Let's test that hypothesis. Okay, if you're not doing philosophy, you're in a problem. I mean, that's the implication of there being a virtue. It's always. And the problem, you can't sometimes nail your soul to the body. That's not going to work. So what do we do when we're in a problem? We don't beat ourselves up. We do something called philosophical midwifery and dream analysis. The dream analysis isn't directed towards being, so this falls down. This is rubbish. Throw out this hypothesis. Or hang on a second. Actually, to do dream analysis, you use the self-logos. What were your states of mind? What were your words? And how do your words compare to being? How does your state of mind compare to the state of mind of being? How was your function compared to the function of the daemon relative in being, or the divine in being? So when we're doing dream analysis, to identify a problem, we have to look for the right information, but also we have to compare it to some paradigm. Otherwise, in a dream, you're beating up some, I don't know, person from another team. Pick a team: religion, politics, country, race, gender, all of the ways that we are divided into injustice and not unified in our hyparxis in being. We're all the same soul ultimately. We all have the same meaning of life or purpose, and we all have the same helping of others to direct us to that purpose. That's Socrates, what Socrates is helping us see for ourselves. But all of the con artists are all us versus them, outside cave bad, or offer you the enticement of a shadow of this by putting you up a hierarchy. Oh, you're better up the ladder than other people, so you win competitively. And also you're better because of your whiteness or your place of birth or your religion or whatever. It's an artificial ladder you don't actually climb through the self-logos and dialectic. Makes you content with your ignorance. But of course, we read that passage. Actually, that should be a quote. It's so good because it really characterizes what we, the nature of, I'll pull it up. We talked about it before. About picking somebody's pocket. Here we go. President Lyndon B. Johnson. I'll add it to our quotes because we've used it a few times and it's a good way. I mean, we are first understanding it according to the logos, the paradigm, but we can have a nice quote to remind us, like a mnemonic device. And this is it here. Let's bring it up. You can if you, whoops, that was quick. Too quick. Try that again. If you, that was way too quick again. Okay, what's going on? Here we go. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you picking his goodness. That's so quick. Oh, I see why. I see why. I see why. Try that one more time. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. President Lyndon B. Johnson. And so that's what he recognized as something, the nature of cons, and we are using this here on our board to understand why that's the case. And that's still on there for a long time. Let's take it down a little bit. Okay, so we can recognize the shadow, artificial hierarchy, bereft of this. So not only are we conning ourselves, we're allowing ourselves to be conned. Therefore, from every politician, not just politician, every person in authority, we must demand the dianoia. Their focus shouldn't be on enslaving people or conning people or grifting people. Their focus should also be on, always be on grifting. But so in our dreams, we're talking about dreams. What do we do when we're not doing philosophy? Well, we're doing our dreams, which is looking for the self-logos terms. What was your self-usia goal or your self-goal? How was your excellence? How was your justice? How was your logos? How was your words? How was your state of mind? But in order to recognize a problem, which most dreams are a communication about, not all, but most, We have to recognize the paradigm against which we can determine a problem. That's being. So the greater we learn philosophy, the greater we'll be able to get the benefit from our dreams. That's why midwifery, or giving birth to our false problems, and philosophy are yin and yang. You have to do both. The better you understand the paradigm of being, the better you can understand where you're missing the mark. And the more you get into philosophy, the more likely your problems are going to come up. So, hey, you can't do philosophy. You can't reach this next level of growth. You can't level up because you still have a heavy burden weighing you down. You still have your soul is still nailed to the body in some way, to a false image of self in some way. So you have to have some way of removing the blocks. So you need to be doing midwifery. So what do? Once we know the paradigm against which we're judging, we know the kinds of things we pull out from a dream to make it significant, we apply the dialectic. Also, we recognize the dialectic inherent in the dream. The dream starts with a definition. Then it goes on to demonstrate the problem, and then it will divide up the problem. Hey, you might have different scenes showing the same problem, defined problem, demonstrating itself in different ways in different scenes. Some of those themes may reflect the theme in different ways, showing differences. And then there's some conclusion at the end related to the problem, but also within the drama, there's a definition. You have a goal. What's your goal? How well do you function in the dream? How do you demonstrate yourself in the dream? What's the drama or the divisions that unfold? And conclusion or synthesis analysis. Did you get success or failure relative to your goal? So even in the way the drama, and this is the two things that Socrates is pointing out in the Phaedo. We are going to define the truth of philosophy, and we're going to mythologize it. We're going to represent it in a story. That's in the Phaedo, of course. He's got his chains on his legs he's freeing himself from. His friends are waiting at the gateway every morning, practicing their discussions, talking about the self and the self-logos, waiting to get let in, and then they meet Socrates, and what do once they're in the club? They do philosophy more. So it's in the myth, but also in dreams. Dreams mythologize or represent in figures, metaphors, and drama the same thing it's defining, allowing us to trace that pattern back, allowing us to return. So the dialectic and the self-logos is the unfolding and the returning, which is the same thing as reality itself. So we then have to raise questions. This dream master, who was a master in unfolding through drama and a master in unfolding through the explanation or philosophical benefit, understanding, and every single metaphor is perfect, everything is relative to us, it knows all about us and our lives and our goals. What can we say about the nature of the dream master itself? That raises a higher level of question. So our reflection on our dreams turns into a higher level of question. There's our ousia spiraling upwards. Because this nature of the dream master is very similar to reality itself, self itself, unfolding into its levels through the dialectic structure with the self-logos terms, pointing back to being, using being itself as the model. So if being is the creator, it's using itself as a model. What's that? Ousia, reflecting on yourself. What happens if you reflect on the highest aspect of yourself? You are in a relationship with yourself in a way that reflects. We talked about how all physical things is focused on something. You have some focus, moving your direction, goal, or focus, and whatever that is how you reflect on others. So it's reflection or emanation, reflecting its creation into the different levels of reality, is what the demiurgos is doing, or the creator god. Demiurgos means creator god. So the dream masters are functioning in a similar way. But hang on a second, Socrates is doing it himself, defining it and demonstrating it and characterizing it in his life. So what's the sameness between the Dream Master, Socrates, and the Creator God, or the Demiurgos? And what do they each have in common? So these are the sort of questions that come up. So, does it follow that we're either doing philosophy, but if we're not doing philosophy, we're actually doing the same thing? We are. Same thing with midwifery, by the way. This is dream analysis, but dream analysis segues into midwifery. You don't have to look at a dream if dreams are more useful, but if you recognize that there's a repeating theme in your life that manifests in different areas of your life, that's a block to your meaningful goals, that's enough for midwifery. Which is what? The same thing. You recognize the dialectic structure of your problem and how it manifests in your problem. So the problem itself, you can recognize the dialectic. 8 steps. Or 4, depending. Normally you look at 4 because that's simpler. The 4 that is. So the definition of the problem, how it demonstrates in your life right now, how it divides up through your other areas or your past. And of those past experiences, what is the most formative or causal? That's synthesis. And how does it cause the problem? Analysis. So that's in the problem itself, but also in the activity. There is a kind of activity of midwifery where you go through the dialectic to come to a definition of the problem. And then you go through a dialectic to see how it demonstrates. And so on. So in the problem itself and in the activity of reflection, it's still this. All 3. So, we're getting closer. Our question is, what do we do in our physical world considering we have pleasures and pains? Well, it sounds like whatever we're doing, make sure we're always doing this, because that's what makes virtues virtues. How can you do that? Okay, when you're doing philosophy, that's easy enough. When you're doing dream analysis or reflecting on a problem in midwifery, those 2 are easy enough. But what about everything else? Having to go to the store. Having to, go to work. Can you maintain your focus on being and maintain your way of looking for and using self-logos and using it through the dialectic in even those experiences? That's a question. Yes for philosophy, yes for dream analysis, yes for midwifery. What about everything else? Well, if you are doing that, you're recognizing being as most real. So you're not falling into the trap of mistaking extreme pleasures or pains as most real. That's the biggest problem of pleasures and pains, mistaking it for most real and clear. Clear is another thing because this is real, but is there another level beyond that called clarity? But we still have a question. Can we do dialectic and self-logos? I mean, we can keep Xenophanes' question. What is the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking? Being. Or what is watching? Is that being? So we can keep our focus by having Xenophanes' question. That's what meditation is. If you keep your whatever question you've brought to birth in philosophy with you at all times, that's sustained concentration. You're meditating in whatever you do. So there's a possibility that you can keep doing this same triad called dianoia in everything, but it's still a question. Can you do it with a mantra? Can you do it with holding a question? Can you do it with holding Xenophanes' question? Are there other ways of doing this? I don't know. Try it. Share your experiences in the group on Discord or in the comments below. Have you tried to maintain this and keep the virtues, even not just when doing philosophy, dream analysis, or midwifery, but everything else? How did you do it? That's part of being in the game.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Sharing your understandings, your insights, and your experiences with others on the quest. It's not a one-person game. Not alone. That's why we have this community. That's why we have this channel. Share it with your fellow adventurers.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So on that note, that's a question. And a puzzle and an exercise and an invitation. So that seems to be where we're at. We have defined a purpose, which seems to be being, and our method is kind of this. So we have our meaning of life. We have the fact that it's brings everybody up, because the closest you are in relationship with this, the closest you reflect it to others and therefore actually help. So any kind of division is a bullshit argument. It fundamentally misses the purpose of reality, the nature of the meaning of life. Makes things very, very simple. If you think the meaning of life is to be more alpha or to have more money or to have more fame, you're in the wrong game. You're harming your soul. And you're going to reflect that harm onto whoever else you influence. Same thing with nations, same thing with society, same things with epochs within humanity. Same thing. Hey, go into a different planet a million light years away and a million years in the future. You'll find the same thing. They're either harming each other, not recognizing that, hey, do it with selves. All these selves that you're dividing up and you're trying to win against, is there a common element like we saw with the tree frogs? Is that soul? Is there therefore a hyparxis of soul that experiences the hyparxis of being, so that the fact that we can use words like beauty and justice means at some level we are all the same, or were all the same, and we had the hyparxis of self-ousia as the hyparxis of soul? By the way, is there something beyond even soul and being called the self? Are we all self? Do we all have a self? Is that the same? Is that dialectic ladder, which is the self-dialectic, using the self-logos to reach self-ousia or being? By the way, self, self, self. It's all self. So that ladder that goes up is characterized by the word self. So if you're engaged in anything else that isn't a ladder characterized by self, you're harming yourself, your soul, and others. You have the shadow of the ladder. It's the shadow on the ground. So you want to divide people up? Oh, no. How about the self? Well, I can't divide people up. Sure you can. What level of self-logos are they? You can divide people. Some people at this level, some people at this level. That's a way of dividing. And you can have, what about fame? You can be more famous the higher up you go. Sure. I mean, they probably won't care about it, but sure, you can have respect and fame for people who have reached a high level of self. But I like to be in a group. It gives me a sense of community. Sure, have a group in like this. You can even have groups for different levels. We're this level group, this level group. But I want to hurt. And that's where we fall down. You don't want to hurt. If this is your model for hierarchy or for fame or for groups or for distinctions, then everyone up here will want to help others down there, naturally, because they're reflecting their own level of development. It's a win-win-win. The question comes, when do I want to harm? When do I think punishment or violence or... Yeah, I guess punishment. Punishment is the word that means I'm doing harm or violence, but it's actually good somehow. Because it's punishment. You somehow learn a lesson. Bullshit. Bullshit. You learn a lesson by climbing this ladder of the self-logos. You encourage people. You see their nobility, to see their goodness, to see their divinity, not to convince them that they're bad or evil and suffer in prison and contemplate, meditate on how bad you are, because all of these people in this room, the judge and the jury and all your peers, they all said you're bad, so you must be. Now, get that into your brain. That's disgusting. That's injustice. That's the literal problem. That's injustice. That's nailing your soul to a false image of yourself, not as seeing yourself as divine and beyond the divine. You can still have groups and hierarchy and development and all that sort of stuff, but it's not based on violence. It wouldn't make sense, because if we're all the self, if this ladder is the self, how could you harm yourself? You wouldn't want to. So we're naturally purifying ourselves from our problems, and our problems are the cause of violence, because you can only harm that which is not you. Desire to harm it. Or you think you're bad, so it's not you or not good. So the self, which is the same as the good, the one self or the good self. And you have to purify yourself from that. To think you're less than the self, or think that you're less than one good and true, that's a false belief. That's the anti-logos, being, and oneself. So that desire to harm other people is just a harmful desire that's going to be harming you too, and harm your incarnations, but it's based on a false belief. And you'll be playing that inner critic out on yourself. The people who act towards others are doing what was done to them, and what is continuously being done to them through their negative daemon, or their inner critic. The voice of the past that we uncover and purify through midwifery and dream analysis. So, climb the self ladder and recognize its shadow. That's the 2 games in town. And what is the self-logos? It's the ladder, the terms that has the structure of the dialectic, make it a ladder, and is reaching being at the top. And of course, when we get there, we're with better men and gods to climb the higher level, because we don't stop there. This is what characterizes it at. This is where we're at the text. This seems to be what he's trying to actually nail down, showing us the implications if we don't do it. And we have a question, can we do it at all times to make it virtues, which is necessary for us to go from being a philosopher to having it at all times. So this is the kind of thing that never loses its power. This is a kind of activity that we do until it becomes our own. So our question is, how do we do it at all times? How do we do self-logos dialectic focused on being? And let's jump into the text. So, 45. The soul of the so seeing through anything other than this dianoia does not lead to the truth. The soul of the true philosopher thinks to herself that her deliverance from ignorance must not be opposed, and keeps away from pleasures and desires and pains and fears as much as she is able. So that's our question. How much can we do it? How able can we be? Can we do it at all times, while playing music, while walking to the shop, while going for a walk in the morning, while making your coffee? Can you always be doing dialectic self-logos directed towards being? If the soul is involved in excessive pleasure or pain, fear or desire, then she'll not only get harm from what you normally get. You get sick if you overindulge. You can make yourself sick with fear or from pain, or even excessive pleasure. Expended desires, you can use up all your energy, and that can diminish you and have other consequences. But the greatest and worst and most extreme problem is what, Socrates? That every time a human soul feels excessive pleasure or pain towards something, she's led to believe that this experience is most clear and real. But it's not true. It's not being in this way. Ontos, as being. It's not actually true. Because it's the visible realm, and the visible realm isn't ontos. It's not being. Ontos, the Greek word for being. And in this kind of experience, a soul is bound to the body most especially, because that very pleasure and pain nails her to the body and keeps self distracted from dianoia, from philosophy, makes her corporeal, and believes that the things that the body says is true must be true. Shared belief that the selves she welcomes from the body. And then she shares in the body's same way, such as food. Like you're feeding the soul in this negative way. You'll never enter into the club, Hades Club, Hades nightclub. We should make a philosophical nightclub called Hades. In a pure way. To get in, it's not like dressing nice or being pretty. It's how well are you doing? How purified are you? Are you chasing physical senses, or are you here because you love learning, love philosophy, or love chronesis? Then you can get in. We'll start this nightclub. It'll be great. So you won't enter into the club, into the separation from the body, either in death or in meditation or in contemplation. If you're quite full of the body upon leaving, you'll fall back again, back into your body or into another body in reincarnation, and you become naturalized to it. We looked up this word and we didn't take a note, so I'm going to quickly nail this down. So we had a look at this word, and I couldn't find it online. I couldn't find it. Long for. Oh no, we did look this one up. That's right. We just didn't make it into a note. There is a note. Where is the note? Okay, let's highlight this. It was implanted or rooted in. So there's a note there somewhere. It's not showing up. So it's yes, right. And I made that hilarious joke about if you do not practice this dianoia, and instead you nail your body to your physical senses, you're nailing your soul to your body, and you are rooted, which is a funny Australian joke, but it means rooted like a plant, implanted, that kind of thing. There we go. Like a seed that is sown, and because of these things, she cannot be part of the joining with the God and of the pure and the uniform. Okay, therefore, it is for the sake of these beings that one who loves learning is orderly, temperance, and virile courage in a just way. So he is showing again that he can switch between those triads. He can use orderly, virile, and being, or he'll use temperance, courage, and wisdom. That's important because realizing that these triads overlap allows you to solve the puzzles. You need to realize that there is an analogy or a way of jumping or double jumping from one triad to another. So that really, this text, that highlights what we're saying. It's for the sake of these beings. What's our goal or direction? Being. And it's that for the sake we are temperance and justice. It's for the sake of those. And what do we just say that what makes the virtues and not the vices? They're all directed towards being and freeing the soul from the body. So this thing here, for the sake of the being, and of course we do it this way, that the virtues makes the virtues just and not the vices. So all of that reflection we've just done, applying our understanding from the text. Number one, has to be from the text. Number two, we have to derive an understanding from it, hypotheses and questions. Then we have to apply it to our lives, make it significant, make it meaningful. Now, the question was, well, how do we live in this way? Not just avoiding the bad, but how do we live in the right way? How do we gain the benefit? What are we relating to such that we reflect goodness and that we can benefit from ourselves? Well, he's just said, it's for the sake of being that we have love learning, which was our hypothesis before. We said we start by loving learning learning about frogs, but then we direct it towards being. Now you're a lover of wisdom. Now you're a philosopher. So this is why we're in a text. This is why this podcast is different from other ones, because we're actually in a text. We're learning as we go. We're discovering as we go. And each time we go through it, we'll see more things. We're not just interviewing opinions or debating someone, because that's not going to change anyone's opinions. Those are the popular ones. So some philosopher who's good at arguing destroys some fundamentalist or destroys some religious person. But the religious person isn't made better. He doesn't change his mind. If anything, he becomes more entrenched in his ignorance. That's going to harm his soul and the kinds of reflections he does, reflecting onto others. So we're doing something different here. We're in a text, which is a kind of triad. You and me, we're both focused on the same text. It's the hyparxis that joins us both. Whether you start religious, whether you start materialist, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you start. Where you start is just a reflection of the kinds of problems you're going to have to overcome in your specific incarnation here. But we all have our own specific issues. Depending on where you're born, the time, the place, the history, the family, the culture, and the state of human evolution through time that we get born into our family. It's normal. I'm not picking sides. Oh, you're my religion, so I like you. You're not my religion, so I don't. That's nonsense. We're focused on the text, but it's like a podcast in that we talk and we reflect and we share ideas and it's fun. But it's different that we're looking at a text. This is what makes it significant. Changes it from what philosophy isn't. Battle of opinions. So, and one of the benefits from having our nose in a text is we can see when we do come up with something, often in a seemingly magical way. We will get a kind of confirmation or a kind of thumbs up, in a sense, like a kind of I don't want to say it's not a validation, but a kind of signpost. There'll be something that we'll see that will direct us that we're on the right path. And it happens all the time. And it seems magical because the text doesn't change. This is one of the features of the logos. It's outside of time. So that's a big question. How does it change? We just said, it seems for the sake of the beings that we love learning to go from frogs to philosophy. And then we read it. We also recognize that it was he brought in the virtues. It's not just what learning is, dianoia, but the virtues. Because the virtues, if you don't have dianoia, then they become the vices. And this is the dianoia, therefore, can characterize what philosophy is and what it isn't. What helps human beings and what hurts human beings. One word. And we read it. For the sake of these beings, what is dianoia characterized as? Directed towards being. That we love learning, frogs to philosophy. And that we have the virtues, orderly and virile, temperance or sound-mindedness, and courage. Bingo, bango, bongo.
Wow.
So this is why another reason why we have our nose in a text. We are guided. Like, I'm not the podcast host. The logos is. We're together. We are both adventurers.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Different from other ones. That's why Socrates is the host. Not even Socrates. He's just communicating the logos. So, the many don't think this, do they? What did we just say? The many podcasts, the many opinions about philosophy. The reason why it's a problem is because the opposite is what the many think. We're special. I mean, which is true. Like, it's different. We have to reawaken this. We just said that. Let's keep reading. No, they do not think, the many don't think that. So, for the soul of the actual courageous philosopher must follow the logos. What did I just say? This podcast is different in that I'm not the host, the logos is the host. And because it can reflect upon itself to confirm what we just say if we're on the right track as a way of guiding us. That's providence. Recognizing that is noticing the logos. Following it is following the logos. Understanding why that's the case and actually listening to it is following the logos. I literally just said that, and I said, isn't it interesting that the reason why we're following the logos as the host is because it can reflect on itself and confirm what we say in a seemingly magical way, as though from a higher dimension outside of time. And then the very next thing we read after we saw that there is, that's why the soul of a philosopher must follow the logos. Demonstrating that thing we just defined. Definition, demonstration. Isn't that cool? What do you say?
Wow. Wow. Wow.
One way of explaining this way that the logos can reflect in a seeming book that doesn't seemingly change is, okay, so think of cows. Imagine cows have a two-dimensional way of thinking. They have perceptions and they have sensations and perceptions. You can say like a worm has just sensations. A cow has sensation and perception. It perceives things, but it doesn't have three-dimensional thinking, which we could call concepts, like humans do. Therefore, a cow will look at us, relating to it in a very strange way. And if it's a good farmer, for the benefit of the cow. But the cow has no idea what's going on. Makes them adorable, but the cow doesn't know what's going on. Because it's a different level of function that it can't grasp. So humans can, put them in pens, get their milk, can bestow benefit or, extract benefit from them. In a similar way, if the logos is operating from being, which we're saying it's an aspect of being, it's flowing from being, then our three-dimensional thinking might not be able to recognize the seemingly magical ways in which the fourth dimension can act on our third dimension. Now, if you're interested in this idea, Carl Sagan has an interesting YouTube video called Flatland. Talks about the seemingly magical characteristics of a higher dimensional being. So, that's just to say that there is this quality of a fourth dimensional thing called logos. And if we are trying to be philosophers ourselves, we want to enter into that realm. So we can benefit ourselves. Maybe not in the way the logos. Maybe the logos is in fifth or sixth dimension. But if there is another realm called being, then in which the good conversations with better men and gods are happening, is where we're aiming for. But just as interesting note, considering we just said that the logos is hosting this, that's why we're reading it. That's what makes this philosophy different from other philosophies, and what makes this philosophy podcast different from other philosophy podcasts. It's not my opinions, not Jed's opinions. I'm not even hosting it. The logos is. And then it says, the soul of the courageous and virile philosopher must follow the logos in this way. So, pretty cool. Keep reading. She must not think that the philosophical soul must free herself, while on the other hand delivering herself to the pleasures and pains, and thus imprisons her again. So you don't just do one and then imprison yourself again. So, stay on the path. The way that Penelope did when she wove her sweaters and then unwove them. But she follows the logos and achieves a calm from these emotions. And always communes in this, in the true and the divine. And so beholding the unopinable. So here we go. So this is the question we had today. Can we do this always? Whatever we do. Always commune with the true and the divine. Can we always focus on this, join with this? And so beholding it, by the way, it's unopinable. We just said the difference is the corruption of philosophy is opinions. Other philosophical podcasts are a battle or debate of opinions in which nobody actually walks away better off. This is unopinable. And so being nurtured by this, she believes that she must live in this way as long as she may. However long you live, always commune, always focus on being, always do dianoia. It's not opinable. Don't get wrapped up in opinions. And that when she dies, she will come into that which she is akin and into such a kind, so escape from human ills. There's our escaping from our problems. And escaping incarnation. You've done your work. From such a nature, there is nothing terrible, Simius and Cebes, that you should fear. And never is the case that the time comes for her departed body should be gone and scattered to the winds. Your soul's not going to scatter away. Don't worry about that. Don't fear that. Don't be panic-stricken upon your death. Especially if you've been living in this way. At that point, nothing remains that exits in any way at all. There's a silence for a long time, as Socrates appeared to be looking at the logos that self had spoken. So even Socrates in this conversation has the logos of the self as the host.
Wow.
As were most of us. Simius and Cebes were talking quietly to each other. And then Socrates saw them. Self asked, "What is it? Does it appear to you that what was said by the logos was deficient?" There seems to be many more apprehensions and objections. So if we want to discuss this sufficiently, if you are considering something else, I have nothing to say. But if, on the other hand, there is something to puzzle about these matters, do not hesitate to speak. Speak up. Share your questions. Share your puzzle. Share your apprehensions and objections. Let's discuss this. And if you could see a better way in turn of reasoning through this, you will more easily find a way with me than take me along also. Interesting that Socrates doesn't say, I have nothing else to say. He has nothing to say. And he was just looking at the logos that the self had spoken. So maybe this whole thing wasn't Socrates. Socrates has a habit of saying, I'm not wise. But then it says the wisest things ever. That's a puzzle. I've got nothing to say. Then who's been talking all this time? Who's been hosting this podcast all this time? Not me. I mean, I'm not equating myself to Socrates, but it's the same principle that we were talking about, reflected in the text in a seemingly supernatural, magical way. Same way a cow might see a farmer acting in a magical way. Looking at the logo self had spoken. I'm not saying anything. Take me along also. Simius says, I will also surely be candid with you, Socrates, for we have been puzzled for some time. Each of us has been urging and pressing the other to question you, because on the one hand, we desire to hear from you what you have to say. On the other hand, we hesitate to cause a disturbance, that it may not be displeasing to you in your present misfortune. I don't want to cause a disturbance. Phaedo says, and concerning which, upon hearing, Socrates laughed quietly and said, "Ha ha ha ha! For goodness sake, O Simius, it will certainly be difficult to persuade others that I do not regard my present condition as a misfortune, inasmuch as I am not even able to persuade you, since you are afraid that in some way it is now more difficult to deal with me than formerly in my life. And to you, it is likely I appear to be inferior to the swans." So him, at the end of his life, say, hey, it's difficult to deal with me now compared to earlier in my life? Like, I've finished philosophy. I've mastered philosophy. I'm ready to go. I appear to be inferior to the swans in prophecy when they perceive they are about to die, since they are pleased to sing before that time. But especially at that time, swans sing more and more pleasantly and rejoice that they are about to depart to the God, whose servants they are. Remember, it's not upon us how we live or die, or how we live it is, when, how, and when we should die, because we are the servants of the gods. But humans, through the fear of the death of selves, tell lies against the swans and say that they are lamenting their death and sing out of pain of sorrow and fail to use the logos that what's the truth? What's the actual, why are swans really singing before they die? That no bird sings when it's hungry or cold or suffers any other pain, and neither does self. For do the nightingales and the swallows and the cranes. They don't either. Though they do say that these sing lamentations through grief, but it has come to light for me that neither these nor the swans sing out of grief. But I believe that inasmuch as they belong to Apollo, remember the god of philosophy, the one that caused Socrates to have this time before his death, the purification ritual. So no one has to be killed by the stage because you have to keep the city pure. Having a festival for Apollo, purification ritual, because Thebes slayed the Minotaur, purified ourselves from something, which is a mythological representation of something that's happening here. That's why we have the Minotaur stuffed toy in the corner. These birds are also belong to Apollo, and they are prophetic by having foreknowledge of the goods in Hades, in the afterworld. Sing and rejoice on that day, differently, exceptionally, than in times past, more at the end of their life than during it. Then, since I indeed also regard self to be a fellow servant, Socrates is a servant of the gods, with the swans and dedicated to the god of self. That's interesting. Not just God, but the self-God. God self. Not God of isn't there. So let's cross that out. Again, which is why the text is hosting the podcast, because we see we see God, and we see self. So the God self, the honorific, not just God, but the highest. I also possess that art of prophecy. Socrates is letting us know about something of his professorial abilities, seemingly supernatural to us, like cows, see farmers. From my master, not inferior to theirs, neither am I any more hopeless than the swans and birds are upon departing this life. Therefore, for the sake of this indeed, you must speak and ask whether you may wish, as long as the servant of the 11 Athenians should allow it. So those are the people who sentenced Socrates to die. So there's a question, why the 11? And the 12 with the servant. What's the significance of 11 or 12? Well spoken. I mean, 12? There's 4 categories of the dialectic, and you can say what's true, what's false, and what's both true and false of each of them. That's 12. Hypothesis goes in the sack. Carry it with us. Well spoken, says Simmias. As far as I am concerned, I will tell you my puzzle, and Cebes here in turn will tell you that which he does not accept concerning about what was said. So, there's the trailer. There's the teaser for next time. They still have an objection, even after this, even after concluding that what we just saw ourselves, that it's for the sake of the beings, that we want to be in divine company, pure and uniform, and it's for the sake of these beings that we are learning. We directed our learning towards being dianoia. We direct our virtues towards being, going from virtues to phronesis, because we're a lover of truth and phronesis. So we do it at all times. And what are we doing? Following the logos. We are calming ourselves from our emotions, and we are beholding that which is beyond opinions. Philosophy is not about opinions. And we're escaping from our human ills. That's our goal. That's the meaning of life. That's our purpose here. And even swans know it. They know that there's a good that they're going back to. And in Socrates watches the logos. What is watching? And he is not inferior to the swans. They have foreknowledge of the goods in Hades, which is the theory of recollection. And I am dedicated to the god of self, and I possess that art of prophecy from my master. The art comes from his master. So he's saying, hey, don't worry about upsetting me. I'm happy. I'm like the swans that sing. I'm going to a better place. I'm going into the club. On that note, please speak up. Share what you see. Share what you're asking your questions. He goes, all right, I'll do it. So that's our teaser for next week. Next podcast. What are his objections? What didn't he understand? What didn't you understand? And in the spirit of them sharing what they see, their objections, their puzzles, I encourage you all to share your puzzles, your insights, what you see, what you're struggling with, your questions, your objections. Share them below in the comments. And do a dialectic on them. Go one step further. Really benefit from your puzzles. Make a dialectic on it. What if it exists? What if it doesn't exist? And share it in Discord. Join our Discord. Share your work. Share your dialectics. Your mythologizing of it through your art. Because we're in this together. This is the human quest. We're with Socrates. We're following the Logos along with him. So on that note, and with that teaser, what are their objections going to be? And could we discover, try this, try it out. Make your own objections. So far, where are you objecting? Where are you not quite there yet? What fears do you still have about death? What puzzles do you have? What did you not quite be convinced by Socrates on so far? Do that before you watch the next podcast. Write it down, share it in the comments, share it in the Discord, and then go back into the text and watch the Logos unfold and see as an experiment, does it reflect something of your own puzzle to confirm you're on the right track, or does it give you answers to your puzzle? Is it responding to you? Because we want to be the farmer. We don't want to stay as cows. We want to see this relationship more so we can follow the Logos more at all times. But also we want to be up there. We want to see what the Logos sees. We want to see being and understand it and have it forever in phronesis. So we talked about that which we are in relationship with, we become more like. Relationship with the body, the soul becomes like the body. Relationship with the divine, we can become like the divine. And also we reflect that which we're in a relationship with, which means it's an activity. We have to keep doing this because you don't just stop. And hey, don't just stop, because that's going to, what does he say? We don't just stop and take a break. Where does he say it? Self-imprisonment. Where was it? Yes. Delivering ourselves to the pleasures and pains again. We imprison ourselves again. You don't just stop. We're always in a relationship. Something maybe in the realm of being, the game changes, but while we're here, you're on something, you're thinking about something, you're doing something. Do this at all times. Don't take a break. And then chase your pleasures and pains as though they're the most clear and real. You still have them, still do them, still enjoy your meals or lovemaking or whatever, but don't consider it to be the goal. Don't consider it to be the most real or pure. In fact, you can use it to motivate yourself to do philosophy. Do this. Then you're on the right track. That is, direct yourself towards being through dianoia, which is focused on being. One is the self-logos. 2 is the dialectic directed towards being as the goal. 3 as our triad. Yes. So that seems like a nice way to end. Right. So we want to be like the farmer is what I was saying, which means we have to focus on it. See how it communicates. Share your understanding, share your insights, share your puzzles like Simius and Seabees are about to do, and see if it reflects back. Because you're learning more about that, which you're wanting to become yourself. And also, it's interesting. How can a fourth dimensional being communicate to us in the third dimension? How would it do it? What abilities does it have that cows like us lack? So, lots of mysterious and cool puzzles, lots of opportunities to share your thoughts and reflections, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for joining me. Oh, and like and subscribe, and join Twitter if you want to watch along and talk in real time. And also, there'll be a Patreon up very soon where we are going to talk about having dream analysis. Also, maybe a once a week reading another book, not by Phaedo, but one of Dr. Pierre Grimes's book. He just released one, or he released one a few months before he passed on. Jesus and Socrates. So we might have, if there's an interest in that on Patreon, we could have an extra read along with that. Also a watch along. We could watch some philosophy videos, particularly Pierre's videos, again, as someone very much like Socrates, to discover the logos in that. And of course, dream analysis. If there's an interest in people wanting to learn dream analysis, applying the dialectic to the dreams where we've been talking about, these are all options that we might be able to do if there's enough interest to support this happening through small donations on Patreon. So, something to look forward to, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you're puzzled, and I hope you're eager for the next one. I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.